Hello again, guys, and welcome to this edition of AI Governance Engineering with myself, Gavin. And today we're going to keep looking at adaptations I've made to my tool in SageMaker. And today we're focusing on healthcare. Now, in this example, we're using a company called Healthcare AI. And Healthcare AI is classified as high risk under the EU AI Act. Any AI system used for medical diagnostics, treatment decisions, or patient risk prediction requires comprehensive compliance assessment, including a fundamental rights impact assessment. Now, I've built 3 custom AI patterns using Fabric to automate this compliance process. The first pattern runs a comprehensive ISO audit covering standards like 42001 for AI management, 23894 for risk management, and 5259 for data quality. The second pattern classifies the AI system under EU AI Act risk tiers, and the third, which is new, performs a fundamental rights impact assessment specifically for high-risk systems like healthcare AI. These patterns are integrated into AWS using a serverless architecture, and when a model status changes in SageMaker Model Registry, EventBridge triggers a Lambda function that runs all 3 patterns and generates 5 compliance reports stored in S3. Today I'll show you this entire automated workflow. So here we are inside SageMaker Studio, and you can see here that I've already got the model already sort of populated, if you will. And this is our healthcare model here. It's a 30-day hospital readmission risk predictor for diabetic patients. And it was trained on over 100,000 patient records. At the moment, you can see the current deployment status is set to rejected. And if we click into it, and if we look at some of the details and scroll down to look at some of the metadata, we'll see what we can see. So we've got the bias and risk, and the value says demographic disparities in predictions. Now, just for context, I downloaded this data set from kaggle.com. Again, that's something new to my process because I wasn't actually aware you could download such useful data sets. So rather than getting Cursor to pre-populate this with data, I've tried to add an additional step to my learning process through accessing more realistic data sets. So that's where this is from. So if we look again at some of the custom data, there's demographic disparities in the predictions, clinical limitations, US hospital data only, domain healthcare clinical decision support. And this is the key thing here, which my tool adds to this metadata. EU AI Act Annex 3.5a for medical devices. So it's being assessed against that. Protected characteristics that this data contains is race, gender, and age. And the risk classification is high risk. There is the size of the data set and the use cases for hospital readmission risk prediction. And now if we go over to AWS Glue, and again, this is another feature that I've added to my SageMaker tool today. I wasn't actually aware about this as well. But after a bit of studying on AWS Skills Builder, I come to the decision that this would be valuable for both my learning, my tool, and for this demonstration. So this is essentially our data governance layer. The crawler automatically discovered and cataloged our training data. And you can see in here, if I click in, and you can see here the schema for all about 50 columns that have been documented. And if we just look through some of them, it's mentioning some of the type of medicine or problems that they have. But then if we go back to the first page, you can see here we've got race string, gender string, age string, and these are all protected characteristics under EU AI Act Article 10. So having this data catalogued means we have full traceability and lineage. So this is actually data governance in action. And you can also see at the top here that we've got the location where this data is stored inside a S3 bucket. So moving over now to a different section of Amazon SageMaker AI. This is the model card section. And if we click in here, you can see the healthcare readmission model card. And this is built-in clinical documentation. It contains intended uses, some ethical considerations. What else have we got? Let's have a look. Intended uses. So clinical decision support for discharge planning, identifies high-risk patients for enhanced follow-up, not intended for autonomous treatment decisions, insurance coverage decisions, or use outside US healthcare systems. What else? Training details, notes on the objective function, imbalanced readmission outcomes addressed through weighted loss, evaluation details. There's some more details here, some more metrics and values, additional details, ethical considerations. Model predictions may exhibit demographic disparities across race, gender, and age. Fairness testing is required before deployment, and human oversight is mandatory for all clinical decisions. EU AI Act Annex 3.5a's high-risk classification requires a conformity assessment, and then we can also measure it against ISO standards 42001, 23894, 5259, and 14971. Caveats and recommendations: US hospital data only, validate internationally, may degrade for rare diagnoses. Protected characteristics are mentioned again, and then there is the custom details, which are from my tool. And under the EU AI Act, this is classified as high risk, and the validation of this system is pending, and the bias testing status is also pending. So now I'm going to go back to the models. I'm going to click into version 1. You can currently see that the status is set to rejected, and we're going to update the status to pending. And you can see here there's just a comment saying compliance gate. This is my tool. EU AI Act non-compliant, reject, high risk requirements are not met. And the moment I click save or update, EventBridge detects this change and triggers our compliance gate Lambda. And this Lambda will run 3 of my patterns to generate 5 compliance reports. So I'm going to click save now and then head over straight to CloudWatch. Okay, so I'm going to go over to CloudWatch, refresh the stream. Let's go to start tailing and wait for some activity to happen. Okay, so in CloudWatch, you can see that the Lambda is executing. It's running 3 patterns. First, the comprehensive ISO audit covering 6 to 8 standards. Then the EU AI Act risk classifier. And finally, the fundamental rights impact assessment. And this is the new pattern specifically for high-risk systems like healthcare AI. ISO audit pattern completed, report length, passing ISO compliance status from audit report. ISO compliance status is amber, extracting individual ISO standard statuses, and it's used 29119. Oh, there's more information here. Updating model registry rejected. Storing all compliance reports in A3. Stored fundamental rights assessments. You can see it's storing all of the reports into the S3 buckets here. Successfully stored 5 reports in S3, and it's also sending an SNS notification. So it's actually sent the SNS through for any concerned parties. And you can see there the model compliance assessment is rejected, and all of the available reports should be here in these links. Review action required. You get the point, guys. No one is left uninformed here. And again, just a brief note about the ISO standards and the EU AI Act it's been tested against. So compliance assessment has completed successfully, and the system's been rejected. And you can see how fast that was, guys. So now we're going to go over to the S3 buckets. So you can see, guys, that I'm back in Amazon S3 buckets. This is just my general bucket here, AIG compliance reports. I'm going to go into audit reports now, and the name of this was 1, I do believe. Yep, version 1. So I'm going to click into this, and here you can see all of the available reports that we've got. So there is some doubles here from a trial run that I did earlier on. So there's 5 reports in total. We've got an executive summary for decision makers. We've got the detailed ISO standards report. We've got the EU AI Act assessment. And we've also got the new fundamental rights assessment. And then eventually we have the detailed machine-readable evidence in JSON format. So let's take a look at the key reports. So first we'll start with the executive summary. And I'm just going to go ahead and download this. Not much to see here. And we'll open this in Cursor, I assume. So the executive summary shows our model was classified as high risk under the EU AI Act, which is correct for healthcare AI. It shows the ISO standards assessment and the EU AI Act article by article. It's showing articles 9, 10, 15 and 17 have all been evaluated, and the model was marked as non-compliant because it needs additional documentation before deployment. So if we just have a look here, there's the name of the model, the the assessment date, overall status non-compliant, ISO standards assessment, compliant green and 0 standards, partial compliance against 4 standards and non-compliance against 2 standards. EU AI Act is being rejected because it's not met the standards. Again, you can see Article 9 risk management system, non-compliant ISO evidence. It was assessed against 23894 and 42001. Data and data governance. Again, this is one of my favorites, and I believe it's often overlooked, which is why I implemented it into my tools and I use it quite regularly. So data and data governance is non-compliant when it's assessed against ISO 5259 for data quality. Article 15, accuracy, robustness and cybersecurity. It's currently compliant. There's evidence that correlates with 29119, 42119 and 25058. There's currently no quality management system in place, and you've got obviously aims and AI system lifecycle. Recommendations, deployment blocked, action required, review detailed compliance reports and address identified gaps before resubmission. And then this assessment includes 4 components, which it tells you about there. So now if we go back to the S3 bucket and we'll look at the new addition I've integrated into this system. So this is the fundamental rights impact assessment for healthcare AI. This evaluates impact on patient rights, the right to health. Let me go back one second. I want to download that. Yeah, this impacts the right to health, non-discrimination in medical treatment, privacy of health data, and human oversight of clinical decisions. And again, this is required under EU AI Act Article 29A for high-risk systems. So again, let's have a look through what this is telling us. So the executive summary for the fundamental rights assessment is the healthcare readmission model is an AI system designed to predict the 30-day hospital readmission risk for diabetic patients using an XG Boost model. Key fundamental rights at risk include non-discrimination, privacy and data protection. The overall risk level is high, with critical findings around potential bias in predictions based on race, gender and age, and deployment recommendation. Proceed with conditions. Extensive mitigations are required before deployment. There's the name of the system, its intended use, as we saw earlier on. High risk classification, yes, under EU Act Annex 35A medical devices. And again, guys, this is purely based on how I've connected my own creations, which is specific parts of the EU AI Act and certain ISO standards merged into SageMaker. So it's adding an additional layer to SageMaker, which currently doesn't exist. Automated decision-making level high as it supports clinical decision-making. Current deployment stage, pending manual approval. Effective population, diabetic patients across 130 hospitals, includes diverse demographics. Fundamental rights impact assessments. This is where the tool really shines. Non-discrimination, Article 21 Charter. Racial minorities, women, elderly, bias in predictions based on demographic disparities, major 4, likely 4, high 16, PO is critical. Privacy and data protection, Article 8, all patients, processing of sensitive health data, moderate 3, possible 3, medium 9, and the P1 is high. I wish these sort of categories would align more easier. Detailed impact analysis, fairness and non-discrimination risk, protected characteristics at risk. Again, we've gone over these enough, race, gender and age. So again, it's just giving you the context for the essential fairness and discrimination risks. Privacy and data protection risks, health data, demographic information. There's also a mention of GDPR compliance gaps, lack of consent mechanisms and data subject rights, privacy preserving measures needed, anonymization, encryption and data minimization, showing you the impact on vulnerable populations. Elderly persons may face increased readmission risk due to potential model bias, and racial minorities there's a risk of unequal treatment due to demographic disparities in predictions. Societal and environmental impacts, economic impacts, potential financial burden on hospitals and patients due to readmission, democracy and governance, trust in healthcare systems may be affected by biased AI predictions, system failures and misuses, predictable failure modes, model errors leading to incorrect readmission, reasonably foreseeable misuse, over-reliance on AI without sufficient human oversight. And we've got a risk matrix summary. Critical risk score 20 to 25. High risk score, so there's non-identified critical risks. High risk scores 12 to 19. Non-discrimination due to demographic disparities. Medium risks, privacy and data protection. Low risks, non-identified. Then we move on to the mitigation plan. Current risk is high. Target risk level is medium. Mitigation measures bias mitigation through balanced training data. The type is technical, who's responsible, the data science team, the timeline, Q1, success criteria, reduce prediction disparities, dependencies, access to diverse data sets, implement fairness constraints in model, who's responsible, the development team, Q2, success criteria, fairness metrics within thresholds, dependencies on model retraining. Residual risk after the mitigation should be medium, and would that be acceptable? The system says yes. Moving on to 7, stakeholder consultation plan. And it's giving you here a list of internal stakeholders that should be involved in this process: legal compliance team, ethics committee, data protection officer. And I think, I'd assume most people or most businesses know that already. But again, it's here and it's showing that you've done best process, best practice, due diligence. External stakeholders, patient advocacy groups, healthcare professionals, regulatory authorities. And again, we can focus on more of the technical stuff, but this fundamental rights assessment is also going to be important. It would be a shame for you to put so much effort into making sure the data side of things is really, tied down and effective, and then you just haven't sort of dealt with the human side of things when it comes to AI Act compliance. And this is why I designed this tool, because I've got many different tools, guys, which you'll be seeing over the coming weeks. And one day I was just thinking, hold on a second, there's a heavy emphasis on fundamental rights here. And, why can't we just bake that into a tool as well? Again, one, so that to ensure that we actually consider this, we do it, but then also to show auditors that we are complying and considering all aspects of the EU AI Act, not just one thing, making sure that our AIMS management system is robust, thorough, detailed, and considers all angles, all issues, all outcomes, all stakeholders, essentially. So documentation, record consultation inputs and integrate feedback into system design, monitoring and review plan, ongoing monitoring, performance metrics by demographic group, incident tracking for rights violations. What else? Continuous improvements. Update the fundamental rights impact assessment based on new insights. Compliance attestation, EU AI Act Article 27. Fundamental rights impact assessment completed. Stakeholder consultation planned. ISO 42001, Control A7, impact assessment process established. NIST AI risk management framework, MAP 5, likelihood and magnitude documented. So again, you can see it's useful. What can I say? That was the whole purpose. I think it's going to be overlooked when it comes to the sort of the engineering side of AI governance and compliance. And you can just see this as a much welcome addition to the more technical stuff. And again, you've got the appendices here. Note, this assessment highlights critical risks that must be addressed before deployment. Stakeholder consultation and robust mitigation strategies are essential to ensure compliance and protect fundamental rights. So again, guys, there's enough detail there for you and your team to act on, and it's baked into the tool. It's not something that, it's a starting point, let's say. I'm not saying that this is going to be, robust for every situation, but it's a good place to start. And then, it points you in the right direction if you want to dig a bit deeper into which ISO standards, where exactly, which articles of EU AI Act, because not every business is going to know where to start. And if my experience studying the AIGP certificate is anything to go off, that's a job in itself. Even now, there's more standards coming out each week, and I'm having to print them out and, try and make time to read them and merge them together. So if you've already got a job and lots of responsibility, extracting all of this stuff and synthesizing it is time consuming, and it's new information as well for a lot of businesses and departments to handle. So hopefully you can see some of the value in this tool here. So back to the S3 bucket. So let's have a look at the EU AI Act assessment. So this is the EU AI Act assessment report. Again, you can see that it's quite lengthy and detailed. So let's have a look at what we've got here. So again, you've got the risk classification, regulatory basis, Annex 3, Section 5A, medical devices or AI systems intended for health management, including clinical decision support systems. It gives you kind of a rough guideline of costs or potential costs here, especially if you're going with like the big four, if we can afford them. So initial quality management setup, name your price, annual maintenance fees per model, ongoing compliance. And again, one of the whole purposes of me creating this tool is to get these right down and make them more affordable. Yes, people that are creating these tools and invested in their time to get the knowledge in order to support you, businesses, to ensure you're compliant with these new regulations. Of course, that there's value to what they do, but at the same time, if we can use these tools to reduce costs and speed up the process, then the savings have to be passed on to the consumer. That's economics for you. And hopefully these tools in the coming years will go some way to changing the game when it comes to traditional consultants overcharging. And if we look at the issues with that one big company, I think it was Australia, the government's paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for essentially ChatGPT output. It's simply unacceptable. This tool here is not a ChatGPT wrapper at all, far from it. This is extracted carefully from the actual standards themselves or the regulations themselves. So what else? Implementation timeline. Again, it's going to depend on your context. Compliance requirements, quality management system, establish a QMS in accordance with the EU Act requirements, implement ongoing risk management processes to identify and mitigate risks, data governance, ensure high standards of data quality, including addressing demographic disparities, technical documentation, another important one, maintain detailed documentation on the system's design, training, testing and validation, transparency and human oversight, and post-market monitoring. Next steps, conduct a gap analysis, establish a QMS, bias mitigation strategy. And these would, this would probably be where you'd need more support with an AI governance consultant. Edge cases and considerations, confidence level high. Given the clear classification under Annex 3 for health management systems, consideration, the model's reliance on US hospital data may require additional validation or adaptation to meet EU demographic and clinical standards. Potential overlaps, consider potential overlaps with GDPR, especially concerning the use of sensitive personal data like race and health information. And applicable requirements. As a high-risk AI system, this model must comply with all of the following articles. Guys, look at this. Look how rich this is. So you don't need to dig anywhere. It's done for you. Article 9, mandatory. Article 10, mandatory. Article 11, mandatory. Article 12, mandatory. Article 13, Article 14, 15, 17, all mandatory. So there, it just pops out of the screen to you. This is what we need to address. The compliance assessment results, it's non-compliant, it's been rejected. And again, it tells you why, specific to each article. And it's mapped to the specific ISO standards. This is not a ChatGPT wrapper, guys. This is now months of work creating this system, telling you what's missing. Again, Article 10, mapped to particular ISO standards, not just part 1 of 5259, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, guys. Evidence, data quality metrics, bias detection and mitigation, data representative assessment, all missing. Can you do that without 5259? So again, if you are being fleeced by a consultant that's suggesting they're going to do AI governance, we'll see how compliant you are. Are they whipping out 5259 to this level? I'm not sure if they are. So you can see from an AI governance engineering standpoint, which is the position I'm taking and pushing, is that consultants rushing to AI governance have got to do better. This conversation is definitely already taking place online, that if you're in sort of GRC, you can't just get away with spreadsheets anymore. The risks are challenging, they're fast moving, and they're costly. So consultants have got to bring more to the table now, especially if they want to advise businesses on AI governance. You can't walk around with 20 ISO standards and try and make sense of something. It would take you weeks, but we don't need to do that now. With some engineering skills, infrastructure as code, all of that stuff there, this is where we can get to. This is the level where we can get to. And again, it's not perfect, and I'm certainly not claiming it to be perfect, but just compared to printed documentation or spreadsheets, surely we can see the value here. Again, Article 15, accuracy, robustness and cybersecurity mapped to the ISO standards. Article 17, that's quite clear. It's aims, evidence, AI, missing, gap analysis, required, established comprehensive AI risk management framework aligned with ISO 23894. Article 17, conformity assessment path, internal control, Annex 6, providers own assessment, third-party assessment, Annex 7, notified body involvement for certain categories, EU declaration of conformity must be drawn up, CE marking must be affixed. Next steps, complete technical documentation, prepare EU declaration of conformity, engage notified body if required for your use case, and register in EU database the date the report was generated, the assessment framework, and the assessor. And then finally in the S3 bucket, what have we got? We've done ISO standards, we've done fundamental rights, executive summary, EU AI Act, compliance evidence.json. So just have a look at this. And again, everything that you need there for your machine readable needs. So now I'm going to go back to SageMaker Model Registry. If I just refresh the page, and now you can see that the status has been automatically updated to rejected. If you remember, I changed it earlier on, and the approval description explains why. So the approval description explains why the model needs to complete bias testing, clinical validation, and establish human oversight procedures before it can be deployed. And this is exactly how this compliance gate should work for high-risk AI systems. Again, reject, high-risk requirements not met. So that's automated compliance assessment for the healthcare AI system. 5 reports were generated in under 3 minutes, covering ISO standards, EU AI Act requirements, and fundamental rights impact assessments. The model is blocked from deployment until the gaps are addressed, and this is how you implement AI governance for high-risk medical systems. So if you want to learn more about automating EU AI Act compliance, check out my other videos, and also get in touch if you'd like to share some ideas with me or discuss things in more detail. Thanks for watching.